Steve, how are you, my friend?
Very, very good. Very, very good. Heading into the Easter break soon. So, just busy to that Easter break and then all been good.
Good. You've been incredibly busy with unwrapping the headlines of the last week or two on DaVinci 5, or whatever it's referred to by so many different names right now. But the D5 latest release, and you've had some really interesting observations on that.
Yeah, I think it's been, for someone like me who's a bit of a nutcase about surgical robotics, when Intuitive has one of their big launches, not taken away from the SP and things like that, but when they have a generational launch like the DaVinci 5 DV5, it's big news because I think that they quite often set the trend for the industry going forward. So yeah, it's a big event. So I've been busy around that. It sort of derailed me a bit, but yeah, I've been busy around that.
Yeah, and what's interesting is I love watching other people's observations about what it doesn't have versus what it does have, and I'm like, well, just kind of take into consideration regulatory pathways. Why would you play your whole hand at once? I think DaVinci and Intuitive have done a perfect job of getting people slightly over their skis with their commitments and then changing the goalpost and just continuing to bleed people out that way.
Yeah, no, they haven't. And you're right. There's been a lot of people saying, "Oh, but look, nothing happened with the vision systems." Hold on, hold on. It's coming. It's coming. There's lots of things that people saying they didn't get. They only got 6 instruments on the force feedback instruments. Guys, come on. You're getting six is good, and there's lots going to be coming. So I think what they've done is they've built what's a really good architectural framework. And I think that they've been smart, and we talked a little bit about, could they go into modular? Could they go into open console? Well, they could do all those things, but they've been smart because what they've probably understood more than a lot of other companies is if you go to the market with just one or two procedures cleared, you don't have a product. Okay. There's no hospital can say, well, I'll tell you what, we'll just stop doing urology then. Just because your robot doesn't have it cleared, we'll just stop doing esophageal work, or we'll stop doing, hernias. So I think they were smart that they leveraged enough on the XI sort of reach, size, scale, all these things, did everything under the skin that are the big changes that affect the performance, but didn't go so far away that FDA wouldn't allow them to use their huge data to get them across the line for broad clearances. Smart.
And there's nobody's pushing them to add more feature sets. And if you look at what they did is, and they're running a parallel path on this, while they've created the infrastructure. I don't even know if it's going to be more than 5 or 7 years because of the cycle of innovation right now, but let's just say it's a 5-7 year sort of mainframe. They have shifted the ability now to bring in leasing. So now you can own a robot or lease a robot. And that in itself is a order of magnitude in the market of change, independent of any features they released. So they're just being really smart. Why open up the fire hose and waste all that water if you don't have to? Wait for the clear and present threats to come on the landscape.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's interesting. There was the specific call that Intuitive did regarding the DaVinci 5 release. It was on the Monday, I think last Monday, something like that. What was interesting was that when they had Jamie talk, he was saying that basically, I think it was 70% of the last deals are all leases. So it just tells me what I predicted a while ago, which this is going to go 100% lease, and that's going to be it's going to be really good for them because they've got the war chest to do it. It's going to be really painful for a lot of small companies trying to get in here, and it'll be painful for the Medtronics and the J&Js because that's a huge amount of quarterly pressure that it puts on their P&L every quarter now because you're going to have to fuel that fire. So they've kind of boxed really clever around that as well, using finance as a weapon.
And you nailed it right there. Is I'm not sure what budget that comes out of, and I'm going to guess that the financial brains of the strategics hopefully baked that in if they hadn't seen that coming. So that's where I come back to. There's no rush in releasing these features because you don't have anything to compare it against, especially in the US market. So I think that even you're talking about a 5 to 10 year run. I was on Device Talks with Tom Salemi, and you brought it up as well. Is they're not only building this technological moat around them, they're building a financial moat around them, and to cross both of those will be a 5 to 10 year journey just to become competitive.
Yeah, and I think I've literally just done a survey on LinkedIn now. We're about 400 votes at the minute, asking people what do they think that this new drop of the DaVinci 5 will give them. Will it give them 2-year leadership, 5-year leadership, 10-year leadership, or forever a day? And it's interesting, but the vast majority are in the 10 to forever. So a lot of people out there think that this is a significant move.
Yeah, and look, every time I look at another release or I leave another. I was just at LSI last week with Scott Pantel and Intuitive Ventures, or Intuitive Foundation, put on a brilliant set on data on surgery around the world and investments that we should be making in health tech in general. It wasn't about a robot. Is every time I leave one of those, I just buy more Intuitive stock. And I'm not advocating for Intuitive stock here, but for gosh sake, they're going to own that category for at least another 10 years, unless something catastrophic drops out of that entire category, which I don't imagine it. They've endured enough hit pieces. But Steve, I want to jump into something while we're talking about D5 for a minute. I want to talk about the ongoing conversation I've been having and some others about this stratification of soft tissue surgery robotics. And I think we can talk about stratification of robotics in all categories, future sessions you and I have, but let's keep it on soft tissue today. I've seen you've been reviewing a couple new platforms out there. And I was happy you got the test drive Moon. I certainly want to get your thoughts on that and how that plays into the stratification of soft tissue robotics.
Yeah, so it's sort of becoming clear to me that you're going to have this spectrum of abilities across all the systems that are going to take you away from what I would call classic, conventional, straight lap, all the way up to what I would say is like the DV5, sort of high-end mainframe, all-in robotic assisted. And then there's going to be a spectrum in between that of capability of the robot. And with that capability will come pros and cons, right? So you lose some capability, but you might improve setup speed. You lose some capability, but you might reduce footprint. So if you look at things like, Moon's a good example. It's a small footprint system relative to a DaVinci because you don't have a console. There's just one big piece. You don't have a separate tower. There's a second piece. So you've got a fairly small footprint. So, when I'm thinking of a small clinic like Wiesbaden in the outskirts in Germany, and you literally can touch either sides of the OR with your hands, they'll fit into that kind of place. Small ASCs, they'll fit in really, really easy. So they'll lose, you don't drive the robot as you would with a DaVinci, but you start getting things which people are appreciating from robotics and saying, well, I don't need every feature. But you know what? It's really nice to have a real stable camera. And a small system like Moon will give you a nice stable camera. It would be nice if, like you have the third instrument arm in a DaVinci, I can retract some tissue and hold it to one side. I like that, but do I need a full robot for that? Well, no, Moon can do that, right? So I think what's going to happen is people are going to start looking at the right procedure for the right surgeon in the right place, and they're going to pick out the qualities of what they've liked out of the big robots and say, for this case, I don't need all the bells and whistles, but I would like a wristed instrument. So they'll say, well, can I get that without a robot? Well, yeah, there's FlexDex and Art Essential, and there's Human Extensions and a whole group of articulated instruments. I like 3D, a really nice 3D stable image. Okay, we'll take a Robina and stick it onto a Moon Surgical, and therefore you've done it. You sort of jimmy rig that stuff together, but you get the benefits of it as the surgeon. And I think you're going to get this stratified way all the way across, and each little robot's going to have its space in that stratification, and then the surgeons will decide what's right for their practice. I think in at that moment in time and in that location that they're going to work.
And this plays into, I like that thought because we had introduced that, I think you and I in an earlier session, that the progress of soft tissue surgical robotics is going to come in the simplification of the solution set, which is sort of what you're talking about here.
Yeah.
And our ability to say, okay, here's the 15 cases or 50 cases I have this week, and I'm running an ASC, and let's just say I have a complex D5 in it because it's a de novo, brand new ASC, big enough, whatever. Or even in a hospital, say, here's my patient mix, here's my acuity as I see it. Let me put that into my matrix, and then my AI will tell me, okay, we're going to use this here. This surgeon's available. She likes this. Here's the tools we need. Now, here's the part, Steve, that I think is a brand new business model that's coming out. As we look at these ASCs and we look at all these choices we're going to have with staplers, straight sticks, wristed instruments on a moon, as an example, even a distal motion, but you've got an entire disposable set now that you've got to have in every case. And you don't have that inventory in an ASC capability square footage. So I think you're going to have these businesses that are going to be distribution centers for both service as well as single use that will now start being regionally located, like our Amazon factories are, or Amazon sort of distribution networks. And I think you're going to have these in major or middle market cities that will be on demand within hours of this on-demand world we're living in. Like in the US, we have delivery dudes and food services, and I can get a roll of toilet paper in an hour from an Amazon distribution center if I need it, and I'm willing to sit on the bowl long enough to get it.
Absolutely. And now what's interesting about that is the second piece that you need for that to work is that the business model changes. Now, if they had to buy the capital to be able to do that in all of these distribution centers, it's not going to work right? But as we move to what I would see as, I predict we're going to a robotic service model, okay, where it's almost like a SaaS model where you pay per case, or you pay per usage, or however you want to pay for that usage. But when you start doing that, now you can have these, as you say, these companies that can go there and they can have the virtual incision set. Okay, so they've got the virtual incision set in one room, or they've got the Moon surgical set, or they've got the DV5 set. They could maybe do it a few different ways. DV5 is probably a little more difficult to get in on a quick, but if you want to take it for a week of operations, you could do that. You could do that, but they could say, I just need a fairly low acuity. It's a 2-quadrant colorectal, and virtual incision is absolutely the thing that will be perfect for me there. They come in and they literally roll everything in that you need for that virtual incision case, and you do the case, and that's how the ASCs don't have their the ORs full of kit all the time, which would be good. So I think there's a model there for that to happen. And actually, we thought about that in the last company I was in. We were thinking about that in Dubai. It was called I think it was called Versus to You, was what Lakshmi set that up as, was Versus to You. And the idea was that you had somebody who retained the equipment and then brought it in for, say, 2 days, because you just did those 2 days. You ripped through the cases. You did your 16 cases in those 2 days, took it out, moved it to the next site. So I think this is exciting. It's exciting that it's going to change the whole way that it's going to work, I think.
And I also believe when you look at the Moon platform and even the distal motion platform, it suddenly now becomes an unlock. One, let's start at the visualization system, right? Historically, it's a human holding a form factor they're used to. We've talked about this before, but now I can start to add so many more features and capabilities and weight and form factor change on that. That's an unlock for the visualization systems. And the same thing, I think, you're going to start to have more of these renegade, and I call it in a respectful way, stapling companies that are going to challenge the Ethicon and the Medtronics, who have owned that classic, contract on, here's your features, great stapler, but what if I can get data now off of, and there's a little company called RevMedica that I've been working with. That's a really interesting set of data and a single use with the reusable on it, that we're going to start to see more investment dollars come into that. And that's just good for the industry. It's good for venture. It's good for public markets. It's good for private equity. It's good for roll-ups. And it's really good for the patient.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. And in a blog that I've just released on this whole advanced laparoscopy, one of the things I talk about is that we're going to get smart handheld instruments more and more. And, as long as these instruments can throw off data, and probably in a kind of Wi-Fi kind of way, it won't be Wi-Fi, but it'll be some kind of Bluetooth or Wi-Fi kind of way that'll throw the data off. The thing that I think we need, and again, we were talking about this just off air before, is I think somebody, maybe this is a plan for somebody out there, and, hopefully you'll give me a bit of shares of your company if you build it, but a company that makes an open platform for digital and data health, so that anyone who's got a stapler that throws off data can, through an API, take their data into your aggregator app. And if you've got an imaging system, the imaging system can talk to that app. And if you've got a handheld instrument that's got grip force, talk to the app, a laser, whatever it be, so that you can start getting the equivalence of the My Intuitive app data richness. You won't get everything, but you'll get a lot of it. And if that could be more of an open platform where everyone can plug into it, I think that starts to benefit healthcare, because then we've got that richness of data that's not just restricted to the robot, right? It's more to the, where I think is still a massive procedure is going to be is handheld, hand-done advanced laparoscopy is still going to be there. But if we can enrich that with data, little company could just set up a really nice healthcare app there that so lets everyone put their data into that central app.
And you referred to this accretive or aggregated sort of benefits on the devices, and if we back it off a moon is again, right, that you call it advanced assisted lap, and I love that, and so now I can take the strain off the surgeon, and I can also hold that camera where it needs to be. Okay, a little benefit there, not a little, but a lot of benefit there, and I can remove one individual from the procedure. Okay, benefit there, and now I can start to get data and force factors on the moon platform off of my tissue manipulation, little data there. And now I can start to aggregate and triangulate all that data together onto this app. And this is really where you start to get the value back into the surgeon's hands and be able to arguably lower the amount of time we spend in surgeries, because I can now give you more actionable data moving forward.
Absolutely. And it's the piece that you said at the beginning as well, that if that can also all be planned correctly, so that your case load and your case mix and your site and all those things, a nice little AI app throws out to everybody and says, you need to do these 2 cases over at the ASC in the morning, do them in this order, using this equipment.
Yes.
That's, you get the maximal benefit. And the data that we've collected over the last 5 years has shown that that is the optimal way. It's about optimization, right? So there's the optimal way you do those cases. You don't need a DaVinci 5. But in the afternoon block, when you've got that large, colon you're going to do, we've seen that the best way for you, doctor, to do that is then to load up your DV5, get on there with the shore forms and the synchroseals and all that, and use it in these order. Now we start bringing a bit of smarts as well into the whole hospital flow and management, which I think is the future as well.
And that's the workflow management. Everybody talks about the threat of AI in health tech and med tech, and it's going to happen on the fringes on decision-making in workflow and the business model and reduction of useless labor. It's not quite going to become at the device level, if you will, that everybody thinks it's going to be in regards to the adoption, because we still really can't figure out where we're going to get paid on that. But where I can get paid is reducing that now 20% GDP that usually is the administrative or the poor planning or the less than optimal workflow. Look, we need to look at analogous behaviors in other business models. In the United States, UPS, United Parcel Service, when they look at routing their trucks, they look at how many packages they have to deliver, and a computer will look at historical traffic patterns, left-hand turns, non-left-hand turns, how to route that, and then it gets put right on a screen on how do I deliver these packages in the most optimal time, on time, safety, fuel burn, and wear and tear on the driver, right? We can use those same things as you just pointed out, especially as we move into these ASC models where they're going to be run like a fine-tuned car in a Formula One race, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. And I don't think people can underestimate downtime, turn time and downtime and things like this. And again, if you get the systems right, with the planning right, where it's, just meticulously done, it does rely also on, you know, your anesthesiologist, and it relies on some of the things like the nursing staff and things like this. But again, I think the base thing is just like you say with the UPS, and also the airline industry does it really well. You know, time at the gate is a disaster for an airline. You know, sitting on the tarmac with that asset sitting still, you know, and with no passengers on it is a disaster. So they use a lot of informatics systems now to make sure of scheduling, gating, flight routing, the whole 9 yards. It's all analogous. And I think that surgery is going to need to move that way. And especially, as you say, when you start getting to places like ASCs, where every second counts and every second's billed, and it's just, you know, very different maybe than a big European university teaching hospital, probably a bit different. But in certain, you know, certain acuity settings like ASCs, or, you know, go back to clinic in Wiesbaden, they've got to be turning, they've got to be sweating that asset every single minute of the day, and managing the staff for the two reasons. One is cost of staff, and the second is the availability of staff. It's that's becoming, you know, I'm watching that becoming a slow train wreck heading towards a lot of the health systems. Just very recently, I was talking with a surgeon who said, you know, lovely to see all these nice new robots and all this and all that, but, you know, we didn't physically have a nurse that day in the OR.
Yeah, and you know, you bring up the ASC. So our firm has been working on building an ASC search firm, and we're slow rolling it right now for a couple business reasons. But the needs right now for talent in ASCs is dire. But let me take that a bit further, because just to call talent in a workplace a component is fair, but the right talent. I will tell you that in the number of ASCs I've been in and the people I've chatted with, is the mindset of the right ASC team member needs to be interviewed for versus the institutional mindset of somebody working in a hospital. And it's almost as if somebody's going to work in a startup or somebody's going to work in a large strategic. Neither is right or wrong for them, but when you hire for an ASC person, if you're the right driver of that business model, you're hiring a different type of person altogether, beside the credentialing that they go through.
Oh, absolutely. And again, I think that's again where technology and the companies can play a part in that. So you can hire the right people, but you've got to reduce their workload, and you've got to make them more interchangeable. And one of the things I noticed about DaVinci 5 that they were talking a lot about was the fact that if you automate a lot of the setup things, you make some of the menu systems easier, you make a lot of the workflow easier. They were intimating that, you know, you don't have to have such a highly trained OR team that just does the robot. What you can do is you can probably have a slightly lower level of training of them, because the assistance coming from the system makes it easier to set up. The surgeon can be more autonomous, so they're less reliant upon, you know, a really well-oiled OR staff that only know how to do the DaVinci. And I think that for DaVinci is a really important piece. If you can start to reduce that barrier, it's still a complex system. You go over to the other side, and let's talk Moon again. So you go to Moon, where it's basically just laparoscopy, okay? And as long as the staff know laparoscopy, they can use Moon. And I was actually surprised when I was with Anne, and she told me that, you know, you need two hours of training in the OR to be able to use the Moon. That's amazing. And that's the sort of thing that will allow those, hire the right people, hire them in, and then reduce some of the burden of all the systems on them, and make systems easier and more intuitive, so that they can actually then be able to use a Vicarious Surgical. They can use a Moon. They can use a DV5 as if it's just any other piece of kit. I think that's the other transition we have to make here. As we bring this technology in, it has to become very user-friendly, so that staff can multi-purpose across all the systems.
And what I also want to think through is the assessment and the training and the empowerment of the team member you're picking in an ASC. I'm going to come back to that, because I mean, this is really my core expertise, is the assessment, the psychoanalysis of, and the motivational analysis and the fulfillment that's required, hiring the right player for that team in an ASC, also drives somebody who wants to be a lifelong learner and has a level of curiosity, because the cycling of technology in an ASC is going to be at a higher rapid rate than an institutionalized hospital moving forward. And the stresses on the individual in an ASC are going to be different than the stresses of those in an institutionalized hospital. And if you pick the wrong player for the wrong position in an ASC, that becomes a critical mistake. And this is where people need to get that hiring process in the ASC so correct, because otherwise tech is not going to get you out of that.
Yeah, no, I agree. And it's exactly what you said. It's the same as a big company and a startup. You know, you've got to have the right player in the right place that can deal with that environment. And they're different stresses, right? They're different stresses in an ASC versus a main block. They're different stresses in a big company versus a startup. They're different rhythms. They're different. So you need a different personality often. It's a very different person who will deal with one side of the business versus the other. Yeah, I've definitely seen that. And I've also seen, especially on the startup side, when you put the wrong person into a startup, and it's not that they're the wrong person, they're just the right person in the wrong place doing the wrong things.
That's right. That's right. All right, Steve, next time, I think I want to talk about, on our next session, there's a really interesting company coming out of the ground right now that is going to be specializing in outfitting technologies in ASCs, about tech flow into it, about how the ASC workflow is going to go. And since I think you and I can agree that one of the explosive areas of growth is going to be soft tissue robotics and the stratification of that in ASCs. So I want to visit that. I want to visit training next time. And there was a great line that Intuitive Foundation said, we focus so much on building a hospital. I can build a hospital in a year, but how about focusing on training our surgeons? It takes me 10 years to make a great surgeon. And while we're putting out all these great technologies, are we really having the right training and facilitation to cut that from 10 years down to maybe 3 years or 4 years on the tech center? So I'd love to chat about that, get your thoughts next time on that.
Yeah, that would be great. It's something that I really think about a lot. It's how do you make sure the front end of the pipe for surgeons coming in gets more compressed. Of course, looking after the other end, making sure their careers are prolonged, but getting more, and it's really about proficiency. So we'll have a good dive in and we'll talk about how do you get people, and especially with the utilization of tech and some of the new technologies we see, how do you get those surgeons at the front end of their career proficient faster?
Agreed. All right, my friend, I always love chopping up with you on our thoughts on the industry.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. And I'll talk to you next time.
Have a good Easter. Be well.